Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias.
I think it was about a month or so ago that I did a video on the history of the physician knife, the knife we commonly refer to as a doctor's knife these days. In any case, two things came out of that video. One of them was a follow-up video about my favorite physician knife so far, and that was this one here, the Parker Little Pill Buster that came out sometime in the 1980s, and this one has pearl handles. It's a single blade version, but it does have a proper pill buster bottom on the bottom here that is made out of solid brass, which is pretty cool. But also what came out of it was a friend of mine who has her own YouTube channel, Vine Climber, also went out and picked up a modern era Rough Rider doctor's knife, and well, she had some issues with it, but in any case, when she put up the video, she got a comment from I believe it might have been one of her colleagues who works in the field of pharmacy, who said that it looked more like something that a pharmacist would use because of the spatula blade on there. And I'm going to address that as well as show you my latest physician knife, and that is this one here, which is by K-Bar. Now, I do not think this is an original one from way back when. For one thing, it says K-Bar on it, so it isn't that old, but I believe this is probably from around the maybe the 1980s or 90s, somewhere around there. I do not know the exact year. What I do know is see that handle there? That is some of the best cracked ice I've seen in a long time. You could really refer to this one as imitation pearl. It looks like it has a very thin layer underneath, a thicker celluloid cover over whatever they had underneath. I'm almost positive that it is not true pearl. The person who sold it also sold it as cracked ice, so that is most likely what it is, but it's really nice, and it's got some good color in it. Better color than what is showing up on the camera, actually, but it has also yellowed over the years. In any case, this is, like I said, a K-Bar. See there, Olean, New York, K-Bar, and they have the number on it as a PhD-97, which is kind of interesting. I don't think the PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy. I think that it actually stands for physician or doctor knife, something like that. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know how K-Bar goes around numbering their knives or anything, but that's the number on this. That might help other people figure out when it was made. Really nice blade though. Notice it's got the long French pull up front here, and then it's got a swedge going on there. Swedge is on both sides of the blade. Really nice spear point blade. The pull on it is not hard at all. It's very light, but it does stay where it's supposed to be. And then it does have a secondary blade, which is the spatula blade. And while the blade is not flexible, it has a wonderful taper going on. And this is one of the things that I talked about with the original physician's knives from the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. So back in the 1890s into the 1910s, pre-World War I, basically. This blade had the similar taper going on, but it was flexible. It was a flexible blade. That's how thin it was. And obviously this one also does not have a proper pill buster bottom going on. But as physician knives go, this one is pretty darn nice, and the fact that it was made in the USA is pretty cool too. So I've got a second favorite physician knife now, this K-Bar PhD 97. But let's talk more about this blade, which is something that is more designed for use for pharmacists than it is for a physician. And I mentioned that before when I was showing you this knife. This is a Pharmacist spatula. It was an advertising knife. We can see here that it's kind of like those letter openers in that it's got a little blade in the handle, but instead of the letter opener portion, you've got a Pharmacist spatula here. And as you can see, it is flexible. And these are also called pill sorters because they're also used for sorting pills and stuff. But it is really something that is used for, you know, scooping powders and all sorts of other stuff. And pharmacists still today use spatulas. This one was made by Ulster. We can see that on the nice little blade there. So I showed this one in an earlier video. I have since picked up a couple other Pharmacist spatulas, and some of them are relatively old, so I thought I'd show those. And it seems like with a lot of these knives, they tended to be advertising knives, and they still make advertising knives for pharmacists today. And that's what I'm going to be showing you now, some advertising knives for that were geared towards the pharmacy world. Now the first one I'm going to show you is the Victorinox pharmacy knife. This is a two-blade affair. It's built on the 58mm frame that is used with the classic SD. It does have the toothpick and tweezer. As you can see, it's advertising some kind of drug that was released, and these were probably given away at some kind of pharmaceutical convention. That would be my guess. Why else would it have the name of a drug on the backside? And it has two blades going on for it. It has your typical spear blade that you find on any classic SD. And then on the other side, it has the label cutter blade. That's what this blade originally was used for. It was called the label cutter. It has since turned into the orange peeler, but it's got a little cutting edge right there. And it's used for cutting around the edges of the bottles. And this was one of the later versions of a pharmacy knife that Victorinox made. Now, this is the only Victorinox pharmacy knife that I own, but I do have another knife that has the other blades that appeared on Victorinox pharmacy knives, and that would be the Mini Champ. And the other blades that you will find on Victorinox pharmacy knives that did not appear here are the spatula blade. That's this one here, which has turned into, I think they call it the cuticle pusher now, but it was originally the spatula blade that you would find on a pharmacy knife. And then this blade, which is the little screwdriver tip with the ruler on there. I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of that was, other than for measuring maybe the size of a pill or something like that. So those two blades were on there, and we already talked about this one, the label cutter. But the other blade that you would also sometimes find on the pharmacy knives were this blade here, which is called the emergency blade. And that still shows up on a few other knives out there, but that's the other knives. That's the other blades that Victorinox occasionally put on the pharmacy knife. They have since turned into other names and everything else. With that said, we'll move on from the pharmacy knife and show you another knife that I think I've shown on the channel before, and then we'll get to three knives that I have not shown before. Now this next one, I believe this came out in the 1960s or so, and this is, well, it's a stainless steel utility knife, and the blades that it has are the typical blades that you find on a utility knife. You've got the can opener here, and then you have the cap lifter and the screwdriver on this end, and you have the punch going on here. Nothing fancy about it. This is all stainless steel also. And then finally you have the main blade there, and you see this is by Imperial Stainless USA. But it was marketed towards pharmacists, and you can tell that by all the symbols you have here, because the top thing here, this is known as the pharmacy globe. That is something that you used to see hanging outside of pharmacies back in the, well, as late as the 1920s, but it goes back into, I think, the 15 or 1600s that you would see that. And then the R with the X there, that basically means prescription. It's really Latin for recipe. And then you have the mortar and pestle on the bottom there, and the same thing is repeated on the other side. So this was obviously marketed towards pharmacists, but it really isn't going to help them as much as you would think. Well, it wouldn't help them as much as this because the blades are not made specific for the pharmacy, but it was definitely marketed towards the pharmacist. Let's move on to a couple knives that were definitely marketed towards the pharmacist. Or at least on first glance, you're going to think that that is a folding pharmacist spatula. And it's identical to a folding spatula that would have been used by pharmacists back in the 1890s, the 1910 or so. Notice how flexible the blade is there. Very flexible, and that's the way the blade should be, the spatula blade should be on your physician knife. Now, this is identical to what the folding spatulas were like for a pharmacist, but this is not a folding spatula for a pharmacist. This is actually a pallet knife or an artist spatula, and we know that by the inscription on the handle. Now, this was actually made by A.G. Russell, but if we look at the handle, let's flip it over. If we can see it there, John W. Massey and Son, New York and Chicago. Now, John W. Massey died in 1910, so that's how old this knife is, at least. It might have been after that because Ann's Son was still around, but John W. Massey and Son was a paint company, made all sorts of paints, including paints for artists and everything else. And so what this actually is a folding artist spatula or a palette knife, a folding palette knife. But it would be identical to what the folding spatula is for the pharmacist. Now, the next knives are the same knife. I just have two different examples of it. And these are made by the Royal Chemical Company. That's what the tank stamp reads, Royal Chemical Company. And it says New York. Now, there is a Royal Chemical Company around now, but that one was founded in 1938 in Ohio. So I'm not sure why it would say Royal Chemical Company, New York. I think this is a different company. Not to mention that one's Royal Chemical Incorporated, this Royal Chemical Company. And it's hocking an oil, or an ointment rather, a perfect ointment actually, and it says Adepthiol. I don't know what Adepthiol is, but it says that on both of these. And it's got a half-dressed woman on both sides, as you can see here. And then it has a person treating an injury to her leg. That's why her dress is pulled up, and you see the physician or somebody treating her leg somehow. I'm assuming he's applying the perfect ointment to her leg. And these are pretty cool little knives. One's in better shape than the other. And both of them feature a spatula blade. And if you notice, the spatula is flexible. So this is obviously marketed towards a pharmacist. We see here that the blades are from Germany. So don't know exactly who made them. I'm betting these might have been something produced by Adolf Caster of Camillus fame, and they were marketed or made for this particular company, which explains why you have Royal Chemical Company on the blade stamp or the tang stamp, and then you have the relief handles going on there. This is the better of the two, both in the condition of the relief as well as the blades. This is the same knife, just in a little bit worse shape. You can see here that somebody has actually heated up the spatula. That's why you have the discoloration going on, and it's also got some nicks and stuff going in there. And then the blade has definitely been used quite a bit more. So this one was definitely used by someone, most likely a pharmacist. The blade tip is actually bent a little bit too, but you do have the nice long pull going on there. So those are a couple other advertising knives that were geared towards the pharmacist, and we know that because of this wonderful spatula blade that is on there. In any case, I hope you enjoyed looking at these knives, including the one that is somewhat of an imposter. That is the artist spatula or pallet knife. That's what this one really is, even though it would make an excellent example of an early pharmacist spatula. Stick around for some slides.
let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.